Intersectionality
is something I take with me
everywhere I go.
It's who I am.
When I think of intersectionality, it's a problem about definition. Trying to define people into any individual category is an impossibility. We're always going to be multiple things, and we're always going to be something different to every person we meet.
I am more than one thing. We are all more than one thing. My gender, my identity, my sexuality, my ethnic background, my race.
As a heterosexual, white, middle-class, Catholic female, intersectionality plays a big role in my life.
Intersectionality is where all of our identities intersect and come together. What I've learned from this course, our readings, and our class discussions is that there are too many words. I am multidimensional. Based on our lives and our experiences, single categories cannot define us. We are multidimensional. Going back to that social identity wheel, I am many identities. I can experience privileges and oppressions at the same time.
All of those things make me who I am. I am multifaceted, as are we all. And everything about our life experiences contributes to how we experience the world around us and how others judge us, interact with us, and perceive us. And that really is intersectionality.
Racism is a piece of intersectionality. I think a quote from comedian Jon Stewart describes it best. We have made enormous progress in teaching everyone that racism is bad. Where we have seemed to drop the ball is in teaching people what racism actually is.
Gender, sexual orientation, and the LGBT community are at the heart of intersectionality. LGBTQ issues are everywhere. Gender and sexual orientation impact everyone, regardless of race, wealth, or ability, and yet there are still barriers individuals must overcome. More than half of LGBTQ students feel unsafe at school. Fewer than 25% of those students see positive representations of queer people in their classrooms, and more than half hear negative remarks about their sexuality or gender from school staff.
If I experience ableism from a disability, I could also experience sexism or classism or racism all at the same time.
I can't operate in a world where sexism is not ever present. I can't operate in a world where my whiteness is not something that people see. And I have an obligation to utilize my privileges and my power to speak up for and advocate for those who might be marginalized.
In a lot of ways, it's all about power. See, growing up white, male, middle class, Christian, in the suburbs of the northeastern United States, I never had any real experience with oppression or with discrimination, at least not against myself. So even when friends and even family members expressed it, I didn't quite understand it. Now in my life, I can understand better, just given my current circumstance, what that actually means, what it feels like to be followed or to have a price change just because the color of your skin, or to be marginalized, talked past, talked over. Only I can step back, as personally as it might hurt. I can still step back and ignore it in a sense and put it into a different compartment because I hold something else that others around me don't have, which is my nationality, which again is just a different form of power structure.
Most schools are also ill-equipped with tackling this issue. Many people, including teachers, have colorblind ideologies. This includes circumventing issues by stating that you don't see color, but only see the person. I too felt this way until I was informed. The reality is that students of color face harsher discipline and have less access to rigorous curriculum than their white counterparts. Black students were also expelled and suspended at higher rates than their white counterparts. They were more likely to be referred to special education and were more often placed in lower classes. We also know there's a strong correlation between race and poverty. the intersectionality of race, class, ableism, and LGBTQ continues to perpetuate this ongoing cycle.
As a middle school teacher, one way I can help bridge the gaps of intersectionality is by using literature. By providing students with literary characters that match the facets of their intersectionality, we increase awareness and decrease bullying. For LGBTQ persons, there is always crossover into other marginalized areas. Consider the gay Mexican-American boy at the center of Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe, or the main character in Luna, who is a transgender teen struggling to fit in. Research on the influence of LGBTQ literature paired with other stories that show similar and perhaps more mainstream marginalized groups allows students to make connections about the struggles facing LGBTQ youth. Studies see commonalities between the characters' lives and their own. Not only that, but by providing appropriate literature in classrooms, we're also offering a platform from which teachers can hold discussions about such marginalized groups where we can make comparisons and little by little break down the walls of misunderstanding to build a foundation for everyone to be accepted.
So for me, intersectionality is acknowledging our differences and what makes us unique and powerful and strong, and utilizing that to strengthen all of us, but understanding that we all bring something different with us in who we are and how we experience the world around us.
What intersectionality highlights for me is the fact that we don't have any single problem to fix. We don't have any one single area that we need to put our efforts into solving to bring greater equality and less oppression. We need to fight all of them at the same time, because even though, for example, we've been able to narrow the achievement gap between black students and white students over the last 40 to 50 years, the same gap now exists between high-income families and low-income families. So even as these forms of oppression, these forms of differences persist, we can't address one without addressing all of them.
As educational leaders, we need to first have self-awareness of our own identities. We need to be allies and advocates for social justice in our schools and in our communities. We need to understand our students. We need to provide empathy. We need to fight for equal opportunities. We need to listen. We need to learn.
Although I'm a white female, I fit into more than one category. Many of my students also fit into many of these categories. Many of my students are minorities. English is their second language. Many of them are diagnosed with learning disabilities, and almost all of them are living at or below the poverty level. The odds are stacked against them. As a reading specialist, I try to incorporate diverse books into my curriculum. I want my students to be able to find characters that they can relate to. I also try to teach my students to self-advocate for themselves. It's also really important for me to advocate for them and to provide them with equal opportunities. It is their right to access an appropriate education.
And while this may seem like a Sisyphean task, like we're just never going to get the boulder up the hill, the reality is there is something that we can do. It is the same way you eat an elephant. It's one bite at a time, one person at a time, one conversation at a time.
First, know yourself and your bias, explore your experience, and own who you are.
Second, identify hierarchies in schools and society so you can draw your students' attention to them.
Third, include the perspectives of the marginalized groups in your curriculum and in your practices. Shift the frame to recognize inequalities equally.
And fourth, work to become aware of interactions that reinforce oppression, hit the brakes, and work to change them.
And as the legendary Arthur Ashe said, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can.